Well, so I've pre-made. So first, in terms of pickling preservation, so the two types of two main types of preservation that I see often when it comes to like making value-added product for your farm is usually pickling vegetables, and then for fruits, making like sauces and jams and jellies, and then it also dehydrates stuff. So a lot of times we dehydrate a lot of our chilies and herbs here at the farm. But the main way for preservation that I see for a lot of farmers is just pickling and dehydrating. Those are two main ones. This one specifically, we're going to talk about canning, and specifically we're going to talk about the water bath method again. So steps for making brine. I went ahead and made the brine ahead of time because I wanted to save time and not make the brine here. Green peppers, any bell pepper you can pickle, any nightshade you can pickle, eggplant you can pickle, but I don't know what that tastes like, honestly. To even just like, I've had pickled quail eggs before. That's really big in like Asian cuisine, like in the Philippines, pickled quail eggs is really big. Beets, root vegetables. For fruit, you can't pickle fruit. I usually see fruits when it comes to like peaches, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries. That's really good for like a sweetened method of doing stuff, so like jams and jellies and leafy greens can't really be pickled all that much, like spinach and cabbage and kale and chard, just because the lettuce is really tender. Some of the hardier leafy greens like cabbage and collard, you could make it into a sauerkraut, where basically you kind of or a kimchi, where basically you chop up everything, put in salt, and the salt extracts the water from the cabbage, and as the water extracts, kind of makes you keep it down. So this is pickled beets, pickled green beans, anything can be pickled. So what's the brine I talked about? So with canning specifically, jellies, jams, and fruit, whereas low acidic foods like meats, poultry, if you're making homemade bone broth, unpickled vegetables, like if you just like cook your vegetables in oil, like if you're doing eggplant confit, that requires pressure canning. Why? Just because of botulism. Botulism, I won't be able to tell you exactly what it is. I'm not a scientist on that end, but it's a bacteria that's really dangerous. That can be very dangerous for a lot of people. Having high acid can eliminate the spores of botulism. And what vinegar basically does is vinegar vinegar and salt, the high acid kind of slows and stops bacteria growth in whatever's going on here. And then with sugar kind of sucks out water from the fruit to keep it from, and sucking out water like eliminates the way for bacteria. So for fruits and veggies and high acidic stuff, water bath is good, but when it comes to doing more low acidic stuff like meats, you gotta use the canning, the pressure canning. Any questions that you might need answered that I might put later on down the line? Yeah.
And let it start to come to a boil, because the heat is what seals.
The heat is what seals it, yeah.
And if you allow whatever you're preserving or canning to come to a boil, let it boil for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then remove it from the pot and let it start cooling. It's going to take a little bit longer to cool, but if you bring it all to a boil, you usually kill the bacteria and the spores in anything that you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we did when I was in the military. When some of us got together, we did some things. Plus, I can now, so I can't.
Okay.
That's what we wanted to do. In boiling water, if you let it come to a boil, a good boil, like almost at 400 degrees.
Yeah. Which I don't know if this one is at 400 degrees. Yeah. Okay, good to know. But you had a question.
So the brine ratio brine ratio is 3-1 for vinegar and water.
I think you just want to make sure you have. I think the vinegar and the salt and the sugar are the three main things that kind of like aid that. But if I were to mess around with it, I wouldn't go below 1-1 ratio. I wouldn't go below 1-1 ratio. I think a little more vinegar is better than not a lot of vinegar. And there might be a thing, and don't quote me on this, where some vinegars might work better than other vinegars, you know? Like white vinegar is really good, apple cider vinegar is really good, but there might be a lot more. There might be some vinegar, like balsamic vinegar. I don't know if I've seen anything that's been picked with balsamic vinegar before. Like there's like fruity vinegars, you know, which are good for like salads and all that kind of stuff. I don't think I've seen like stuff ever picked with those. Maybe I think it might be just because it's a lot more condensed and it's just a different type of different type. But like white, apple cider vinegar, even rice vinegar, is good for kind of like pickling and preserving. And any other questions?
Yes. Can we use fresh pepper instead of flakes?
Like fresh cut chili pepper? Yeah, I would have used fresh cut chili pepper if I haven't, but I don't think ours. We have some chili peppers on that side, but they're so green. I always prefer when it comes to pickling, just fresh anything versus dried, because I think it has a better taste to it. I also understand that might be not the most at reach for some people, so you know, dried is always fine. But when it comes to me, I try to use as much fresh stuff as possible. One thing when you want to put it in the jars, you always want to leave a little bit of headspace is what it's called. And usually on any jar right here, the headspace is just kind of like you don't want to fill it up all the way to the top. You want to leave some headspace. That way, once you submerge in the water and things expand, there's room for it to kind of expand and do its thing. And it's not so much of an issue for this one, but when I've canned and jarred like salsa, any sauce that's a little more dense, you kind of want to take a toothpick and kind of you want to go through and kind of like this to kind of get rid of any air pockets in there. You want to make sure it's kind of like completely just in there. And then I'm not using this. And then when it comes to the actual equipment, all right. So we have the jar, and I was at home and I pre-sanitized the jars. Everything you also want to make sure. It's kind of hard to do in an outside space because we're just out here, but make sure everything's as sanitized as you can. Which is why I didn't do a lot of the chopping on site. I didn't do a lot of like the prep on site. I did it at home. You'll see a lot of people that jar and can will soak or boil their jars beforehand to kind of like kill all the bacteria. Same with the same with like these right here too. People like I see have like, but yeah, the lid and the seal. You want to make sure at the very least all three of these things are as sanitized as possible, because the whole point is you don't want to like have a lot of bacteria or like something might contaminate. Same with your cooking surfaces, making sure your knife is sanitized, making sure your cutting board is sanitized, which is why I did all this prep at home. I just want to, try to not have it be sanitized. These jars, if you're doing it for home, the jars are reusable. They're glass. You can use them as often as you want. But usually it's best practice to kind of maybe not use these after multiple use. You'll know like along the rim here, there's like, one thing I mentioned here, what's it called? It's called the headspace, air bubble, then lift it. Fingertip tight is what I read on the internet, that's what they call it. And that's basically making sure that you have it, you don't want to like completely tighten it and then put it in there, because you have to leave some space for it to kind of like water, for the air to be sucked out. Because basically once you put it in here, the water is just going to be sucked out, which is what causes the seal to happen. So yeah, making sure that that is not too tight. Because if it's too tight, it's not going to have the airflow that it needs to kind of like do the seal. In terms of other like equipment you'll need, I usually use a big one of those big tin stop pots that you use to make like big batches of like gumbo and stuff, but I didn't want to haul out stuff over here, so I just use this one. But a big stop pot with a tin bottom is pretty good. Something at the bottom of your pot to allow airflow to go through. So you don't want to just put your jar directly onto the bottom of the pan, because airflow needs to go through. Airflow needs to go through the entirety of the entire jar. So usually there's one of these where you can like kind of like place it on the bottom, you know, and it kind of like sits right there, and you can like expand it different ways, and then you could do that. Right now for this one, I just have like one of these rags from the restaurant. I just have at the bottom. The rag looks perfectly fine. But you can also, if you want to get really involved with it, you can get like a canning basket, which is basically like a basket that you soak in there, you put in there. Because personally, I do not like this or this one, just because this one, every time I do it, it just rises up. It drives me crazy. But it worked. I got it for like $4 at Walmart down the street, so it's not that bad. In lieu of a basket, you need to have one of these. These are your canning things you put in there. Pretty self-explanatory. You put it in, take it out. I got this pretty cheap at Walmart too. If you have the canning basket, it eliminates the need for this, you know. But it's always good to have on hand just in case. But pretty simple. Like other than that, then it's just water and then whatever ingredients you want to have for that. There's different types of time for how long one thing should be submerged in water, depending on like the size of the jar you're using, what it is that you're jarring, and also altitude plays a role. Louisiana and a lot of states, well, I think most states, have this thing called cottage food law. The cottage food law basically allows individuals to produce and sell certain types of foods that they've made in it. Like a federal law that kind of does it. Each state kind of does their own thing, so each state's a little bit different. Here in Louisiana, like baked goods, like bread, candies, dried mixes, jams, jellies, sauces, syrup, spices, all that kind of stuff. If you make it at your home, cottage food law protects you and allows you to sell that at the farm. So for example, there is a farmer that I know called Erica Sage. She lives in Central City, just up the street. Her farm is Petite Garden, and she works for Sprout Nola, but she's also that's her side business. And basically, like, she has a backyard farm garden, and she dries oranges and lemons, and she like makes soaps and all that kind of stuff. And she's able to sell that at the farmers market and at other like market events around town because of cottage food law. Annual sales cap is $30,000. There's a bill called HB 150 that I think it's aimed at releasing that cap to allow just unlimited sales, and it'll change. There's only a handful of requirements that you have to have as an individual that wants to sell. You do need to have a general sales tax certificate because you are selling stuff, and you do have to pay a tax on it because of money and capitalism. You also have to have a local sales tax certificate depending on which jurisdiction or parish that you're going to be selling in. So if you're going to be selling in Woods Parish, you have to have a sales tax certificate for Woods Parish. I think it's the same as Woods Parish. I don't believe you need an occupational license. If you're wrong with that, don't quote me on that. I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. So don't tell them, oh, I heard Dimitri said this, and he went to law school. No, I didn't tell you. I'm not giving legal advice. But I think you have to have at least the general sales tax certificate and a local sales tax certificate. this one right here, this pickled beets from Isabel's at the farmer's market. And basically it just has their logo, it says dill vegetables, ingredients, dill, vinegar, water, fresh veggies, their address, and it says home. It just needs to say, clearly state that this was made at a home. You can, there's a lot of different iterations of how you could say it. The law doesn't say that you have to specifically say this thing. Like the law just says that you have to state that it was made at a home. So if you do want to take all this to the next level and have your own little small business, all you really need is just your sales tax certificate from the state and from those areas you're selling here, and then you have to make sure that you have a label that shows yourself on there. And yeah, that's Louisiana cottage law. This thing I have here has a little bit of additional information of what you can and can't do. So meat's not covered. Low acid canned goods are not covered. So low acid stuff like broth, bone broth. You can't make the bone broth at home and then sell it at a. Even if you go through the methods of pressure canning, as of now, the law states that you can't sell that